Disclaimer: even though I may sound harsh towards things or people I talk about in these critique videos, please note that I'm committed to trying to help the creators out rather than antagonize them. Please do not go out of your way to attack or harass anybody who's discussed. This behavior will not be tolerated. Also, please note that my videos are intended for more mature audiences, so viewer discretion is advised. The video shall begin right now. One thing that's been evident to me for almost my entire life as a commentator has been that the cartoon community provides oodles of interesting material. Recently I collaborated with my pal the Litterbox Critic on a review of a web cartoon developed in its blossoming years. Please go check that video out and support her channel if you wish. I'm planning to discuss more related subjects for future Brackets Racket installments. However, there's one recent case that I feel deserves a relatively short video about. Right at Summer's dawn, I was exposed to a video rant done by an animation appreciator criticizing the community's absurd standards, titled "The Cartoon Community Will Never Be Satisfied." I got curious, and initially I was thinking this was going to tap into much of the gripes I've had with online toonheads this past year. To an extent, there was some shared sentiment, and on whole this rant provides decent levels of insight on the matter. However, something felt off about his delivery and tone. That quickly awakened my senses on the actual motivation behind it. That problem persists through much of the video, but it gets very ugly around the 8-minute mark.
As you can imagine, we're going through a cycle again. Some new product that hasn't even been released yet or hasn't even been given a proper chance, like Elemental or Ruby Gilman, is classified as bad because it's not better than other Masterpiece animated films. It has a cringe animation style. It has a plotline that is mid. And all the debates and all the arguments and all the fighting over this medium and its quality, and it's just... oh my god! Shut up! Just shut the fuck up! I can't take it anymore!
This guy is really upset about how the internet's been reacting to the latest animated releases, especially in cinema. And believe me, I can kind of sympathize with his frustration to an extent. Online discourse for most things has mutated into a competition on how right one side of the conversation is, and that's determined by trivial social media statistics like upvotes and ratioed replies to the clowns who seek validation. I really dislike this evolution of destructive social interaction. However, there's some occasions like here, which suffer from getting too worked up about something that shouldn't be too big of a deal. This may show passion for the subject, but at the cost of clear and realistic judgment.
I'm tired of all the complaining. I'm tired of the fictional studio wars. I'm tired of Bill nostalgia. I'm tired of the attacks towards others for having an opinion. I'm tired of the harassment against writers and animators. And most of all, I'm tired of all the fighting over such stupid bullshit. I've said this before and I will say it one last time. Enough, because this is just getting sad and pathetic at this point.
Even if what he's saying holds truth, letting your emotions take over has its serious drawbacks. Like, think about this. This may just be me, but even with the awful state of media discussion right now, this isn't doing any favors to the problem. If anything, the reactionary nature is fueling the fire, especially when your disappointment in people is this intense. This has the vibe of someone who's very defensive about animation off principle, and lacks an understanding of why some audiences haven't been clicking with recent projects which share the medium, basically falling into the trap of toxic positivity.
Literally none of the directors and artists want any of this, yet you all still persist. It should be clear by now that none of you are animation fans, just toxic shitheads that are terminally online and have never felt the sun for once in their goddamn lives.
There's little more sign of being terminally online yourself if conflicting takes on Twitter drive you to this point. Plus, not very wise of you to claim they aren't true animation fans if they argue about it. People have their preferences, and sometimes they may be jerks about it. However, that doesn't make them any less of one. And I'd prefer not gatekeeping that title just because of the bad apples. Reminds me of another obnoxious backlash from last year, which questioned an animation reviewer's purity as a fan for not watching a trendy show. Don't worry, we'll get back to him later. Besides, it shouldn't matter whether they identify as cartoon fans or not. I know for certain that some of those chiming in aren't. Everyone's entitled to express how they feel about an animated work, even for stuff that's yet to be released.
Just please, for 5 minutes, can we have a normal discussion about hand-drawn and computer-animated moving pictures without evolving into a fucking Vietnam war zone? For 5 minutes!
God, this is overly dramatic and doomerish even by my standards. If these toxic discussions are harming your mental state this badly, an online break is necessary. At the very least, just discuss this stuff with friends in more closed-off spaces. You aren't forced to participate in the arena that rewards this tribalist behavior. Yeah, that section of the rant really didn't sit well with me, which is unfortunate because much of the video before this seemed rational. Nothing that biting, but at least it provides good enough information to those uninitiated. There's not all too much else awful about it, aside from a few misdirected claims here and there.
And ever since a mysterious animation commentator came along the same year as TTG to talk about the atrocities in animation, I'm not gonna say his name, but I think you know who I'm referring to. It's become more common for internet dickwads to harass and threaten anybody who worked on a certain show if it came out with a bad episode.
It's easy to blame that one guy for causing the latest waves of harassment directed at stuff the attackers despise, even if that trend had steadily grown even without his influence. In the past, mockery of names such as M. Night Shyamalan, Jason Griffith, and Justin Bieber was encouraged by internet think tanks. Most didn't hold ill intent with their comments, though there were some who promoted their harassment off the words of those influential critics dissing them. Much of that mob mentality was happening before the Mystery Man even started. One could say he enabled it, and I won't argue that since it did grow worse on the surface afterwards, and obviously Enter should have never made those remarks. This unfortunately happened right at the apex of his popularity, and his fans were very impressionable. Perhaps coincidentally, it was also when the chronically online lifestyle grew more common, along with the quest for attention which comes from it. I could say more, but funnily enough, that's not even what motivated me to cook this up. One thing's for sure, there may be a secondary motive behind that rant beyond the relevant topic.
Well, at least I tried. I just hope to God it doesn't happen to Pastmates.
Bro, what the hell is Pastmates? Yup, he decided to self-promote his own concept for an animated series during this. A bit selfish, but probably not the worst practice. This isn't just a passing mention though, since he's really committed to try and sell this idea. So dedicated that he actually made Twitter and Instagram accounts to promote it, and even a funding campaign over on Kickstarter. This was started on June 5th, and had a video announcement released a few days prior. I think it's only fair that we give that a watch.
Hi, I'm Mason Steyer.
Whenever I think of the name Mason, I think of this.
Mason, do you realize you already have Ben?
Mason, don't you already realize you already have Ben?
You might know me as Mason II from YouTube, the creator and former runner of that one theme park gimmick account, and the one that uploaded a short compilation of the DNA Productions Paul logos in HD under a different identity, but managed to get more views than my main ever will.
Or you may not care about his faint notoriety, since a gimmick account and a semi-popular compilation of logos from a defunct studio shouldn't be used as examples to get your name out there. For one, your main account's performance both with views and subscribers is relatively low, much like mine is. And secondly, investors won't care about how well an irrelevant logo video and gimmick account you used to operate performed if you're pitching a cartoon. They look for what you've truly made, and past experience as an artist or animator, which you appear to lack. Expressing sadness for how those two things are more popular than your main doesn't help either. Remember, this isn't just a regular YouTube video, but an actual fucking pitch.
Depression aside, I am here today to reveal a personal project of mine that I've been working on since last year, and now that I've graduated high school, I'm ready to move full steam ahead with it.
Okay, so the lack of experience is basically confirmed by admitting you're just a high school graduate. Props for dreaming big, I guess, even if you lack expertise. But hey, I don't want to sound like an ass who crushes your hopes and dreams. Let's just see what the premise for Pastmates is from the idealist's own words.
Pastmates is about a 38-year-old man named Dan Hutchinson living on his own in a miserable life in the dystopian year of 2040.
Finally, a show for the lifeless middle-aged souls out there. Of course it's also in a dystopian future setting. Can't you just tell a doomer came up with this?
A reincarnation of Hitler has become president.
Is it a true reincarnation? Or is it just Ron DeSantis or some other weird fascist analog like him? It's about as vague as you can possibly get with that exposition. I guess this doesn't mean all too much.
Conglomerates have taken over the world.
Wait, you mean they haven't already done that? Good to know this future isn't really that different.
And General Hospital is still running on ABC for some goddamn reason.
Mason, why do you care so much about a boring, long-lasting soap opera still airing? What relevance does this even serve to the show's plot? All I can guess is that Dan despises it too. As a joke, it doesn't really land either. At least reference the 80s disco novelty song based on it.
One day, a younger version of Dan, whom we call Danny, is sent down by someone or something unknown to stay by his side until he reaches his middle-aged adult stage.
The winner of the Illogical Circumstance Award. I'm serious, that fails to make any sort of sense with the way this happens. One of the cheapest writing excuses in the book. To me, it just sounds like Dan is so hopeless that he imagines his past self as a means to cope with his dreadful life. I'd buy that explanation better, and it would still be nonsensical.
Danny's goal is to help Dan reconnect with his inner child and find a positive way around the difficulties of life.
Fundamentally, this just doesn't work for the main premise. It's way too simple for it to be compelling enough, and it doesn't offer much creative potential. It simply doesn't make sense for Dan to look to his less experienced child self for guidance. Take note also that Dan is 38, while his younger self, which got transported, is only 10. Methinks the implications of this are kinda fucked up, don't you think? Especially if Danny's goal was for him to discover his inner child. Either I'm overthinking it, or this sounds sus as hell.
I don't think Illumination or DreamWorks would be comfortable having a movie featuring a teenager going through a period. Well, maybe Ruby Gilman could change that.
Nah, that's definitely sus, man.
No matter what, by the time the sun sets on Dan's 40th birthday, Danny will be sent back, Happy Dan or Unhappy Dan.
It's pretty sad how more thought looks to have gone into how this will conclude than when the two are together, which is seemingly of equal importance. Both forms of Dan appear to be one-dimensional personality-wise also, Dan's current self being the groaning loser, and Danny just being your typical kid.
So it's basically the Fairly Odd Parents meets the kid. Or the Adam Project. Or any other piece of media where an adult meets their past self. But better.
One big pet peeve I have with aspiring creators wanting to make a series of their own is when they have to compare their work to something popular. It's sometimes used as a substitute for actually explaining the show itself. This did bother to give one, but it's so bare bones that it inches really close to doing that. But I'll cut him a little slack for it. After all, he isn't really experienced. After this, Mason shouts out the artist who drew the characters for it. I won't knock him for it since there's a lot of cartoons where the main producer barely even draws for it. External character designers are common, and he's at least giving credit to the one doing the work. Though there's also a short skit with the video avatars the artist also drew during this, which throws the balance off.
I have nothing to do with this. I don't even get shown these videos anymore.
Yeah, we totally needed that for this cartoon Kickstarter. After that, he announces he's hiring workers for its development. Standard stuff, really, but obviously, you want to know what the actual Kickstarter's like. As I said before, this began on June 5th, but the period for crowdfunding ends after only 2 months on August 4th. Now, I'm not sure if this is a limitation imposed by Kickstarter itself, but that doesn't sound like enough time for a campaign like this. Mason himself even acknowledges that getting this off the ground will be difficult with a small following.
Getting this pilot, yes, I said pilot, off the ground isn't gonna be easy. Especially for a small content creator like me. And that's why I'm asking for your financial help.
So he's already been disadvantaged in that department, but who knows? Some nobodies had fluke successes. Mason even has special tiers to give potential fans perks depending on how much they donate. And with this being a fundraiser for something costly, some of these tiers go really high, peaking at a whopping $1,000 pledge reward. Epic! Apparently all that gives you is stuff like a thank you card and a DVD for the pilot. Only 10 slots available, by the way. Also note the estimated delivery time for this tier in particular. January 2027. Damn, those donors better have patience. At least it ships everywhere, even under the sea. Unsurprisingly though, he doesn't sound too confident about these plans in the announcement video.
Okay, looking at some of the promises I made, I might have to hire more than a show crew to keep these promises, so use the email.
Of course, you probably shouldn't be setting goals like this before you know they could be achieved. Frankly, it's not like you're offering much incentive to donate, given the pitiful rewards matched to their prices. And as standard for campaigns like this, Mason wants the word spread around. Make sure your pets are also aware of this. This needs all the help it can get. And that means you, Tommy Cato. Your pet aliens have to pitch in. Alright, enough beating around the bush. I must get to what prompted the necessity for this video in the first place. The budget that Mason himself is asking for this pilot. I get it, animation is expensive and hard. So a relatively large budget is expected, at least around the $30,000 to $50,000 mark for a project like this if it's like a web series. This however has considerably higher ambitions from the creator, as he wants to turn this into a genuine TV grade cartoon. Considering how he's already tempting fate with even the lower end of the budget scale, this will be no easy task, and sounds disastrous from the off. With that information in mind, guess how much Mason wants for this pilot to get made? 50,000? Nope. 100,000? Also nope. 200,000? Still not even close. 300,000? What do you think? 400,000? Well, that's almost it. The actual goal is set to $410,000. In fact, this wasn't even the original budget he set for the Kickstarter. At first, he set that to be an even more unreachable $610,000. Now, let's be smart here. That budget is actually typical for your average television cartoon. Episodes of SpongeBob, for example, cost an average of $300,000 each. Some shows have even higher budgets, with a few big ones like The Simpsons being in the 7 digits. Now, of course, those are professionally made works that utilize expensive equipment, recording spaces, and software in their production. The budget also takes into account wages from those working on it. That last part is important, as it's apparently the motivation for why he's asking so much from it.
This Kickstarter is to not only support the pilot, but the artists, animators, writers, voice actors, and everyone else who is going to help make Pastmates happen. They matter just as much, you know.
Sure, go and preach that. How many workers would you ideally have on board for this? Doubt there would be a big enough team for the budget to make sense. I'm also not sure you'd make a good businessman, or be in good graces with the feds. I hope you get a good financial advisor for something like this. Then again, why am I even suggesting this? We already know that this target will be impossible to reach realistically in only 2 months. One of those has already passed, and well, This is comical. God damn it, the joke I was gonna make got ruined after someone donated $25. In order for this campaign to be successful at this rate, it would need to receive an average of over $15,000 per day. Even if the deadline were to be extended, this goal cannot be achieved no matter how much promotion gets done. I don't think the audience of cartoon consumers have the funds necessary to donate to this risky endeavor anyway. You might be seeing this internally already, but this campaign reminds me a lot of another disaster which was also for an animated pilot, and funnily enough, it's from the previously mentioned mystery man, Mr. Enter. Yep, I'm referring to the infamous Growing Around Indiegogo campaign. Yes, one of the biggest stains on Enter's record, and an event that remains one of the textbook examples for awful crowdfunding campaigns. Personally, I feel the reactions were overblown a little bit, mainly when this failure was weaponized by his most adamant complainers. Criticisms for the project and especially the campaign were deserved, but bad intentions were unfortunately standard, especially afterwards. It's why I didn't bother addressing it when I talked about Enter previously. Regardless of how you feel towards the aftermath, it's inarguable that Enter bit off way more than he could chew. He was both setting himself up for scrutiny for being an animation critic making his own work, and his ambition exceeding what was realistically possible. But most importantly to this situation, just like Pastmates, it also had a lofty goal set for its funding period. Yet somehow, this project ends up one-upping even that one in this aspect. Relative to Mason, Enter at least had perceived clout back in 2018 during his Indiegogo campaign. He was on a decline, but not a steep enough one yet. Of course, this would have gone better had he substantially lowered the goal. And I want you to keep this in mind. Mason is demanding over $400,000 to be donated for his pilot. Growing Around's goal, however, was actually less than that, which aimed to get $350,000 in donations. Make no mistake, that is still insane for an independent creator with no major connections or experience in the cartoon field. But as mentioned earlier, Enter did have an actual audience who were more than happy to pledge for it. After all, even though it was a colossal blunder, donors still gave him just over $10,000 for it. I think another important thing to consider is how you advertise your ideas can also strongly affect its chances for success. Mason's pitch video, as shown before, was honestly pretty bad at giving potential backers incentives. There's almost no substance to justify pitching in, and it has very unprofessional presentation. So unprofessional that when he had to update the video on Kickstarter correcting the outdated budget, he,
with the goal of $410,000 to give the pilot a $300,000 budget.
Holy dinko, how does one manage to screw up this bad on a pitch with such high stakes? It's one of the laziest retractions I've seen for any update. He didn't give a shit. Anyway, other than that, the whole thing feels half-baked, almost like Pastmates hasn't even passed the concept stage of development. That would possibly explain why he believes that the pilot itself won't arrive until 2026 at the very earliest. This is something Growing Around actually had an advantage on. Enter was at least developing that since 2014 and spent years away from his YouTube career on it. Enter even published one of those stories into a book, so it at least had a stronger base. It's why there's an actual outline for what Enter wanted the show to be, and a realized world and premise that, while basic and or confusing, offered something to look forward to. Mason doesn't even have any actual concept art to show at the very least, besides the two forms of Dan having simple refs made. A promotional image with the two on a white background doesn't really count either. Those assets were so stretched thin that he often plastered their faces over pop culture icons for the damn video. And I'm not even sure if this was done either as a joke or cynically considering how little this has provided. How does Mason think he can launch something this big out of nothing? Who's this even for anyway? The closest we get for a demographic is in the Kickstarter's description, which says it tries relating to those who've had both rough and good childhoods, which in all honesty sounds too broad and meaningless to serve as a selling point.
Depressing how even after 15 days it has even passed $1. Consequences of not enough people knowing you exist on the internet.
Maybe. It might also be that not enough people are compelled to fund something which you failed to properly develop. You can't set your goals this high and be rewarded for it with open arms with this little effort. This requires a lot more thought than you seem to give. And I must remind y'all, if even Enter wasn't capable of this with a moderately large following, what makes you think there's a chance in hell this can break through when you're asking for more than he did? However, all is not lost though. Mason does allude to turning Pastmates into a graphic novel as a backup plan.
If not, maybe I could sell it as a graphic novel, then a pilot. Maybe?
Yeah, he's really unsure about it. Personally, that's what it should have started as. Not only would less work need to be done to promote it, the barrier for entry isn't as extreme for those compared to animation. In fact, turning Pastmates into such a graphic novel may offer greater chances for his intended vision to be fulfilled eventually. Then again, it may be a sign of narcissism that he wanted to make this a cartoon first, rather than go the easy way and develop the series first through other mediums. I do apologize if I've been real harsh to what's likely just an inoffensive passion project. I really don't mean to come off as an asshole towards a small creator. writer. We can agree that's not productive at all. Still, so many get caught in their own ambitions that they can't accept the loss. More than anything, his insistence coupled with really defensive stances on animated blockbusters make this passion project harder to respect. While I don't view him as greedy or really that narcissistic, he doesn't grasp how hard it is to develop something from scratch, especially an animated series, which I could forgive some if he didn't act all disappointed at the cartoon community having high standards for animated projects and obsessing so much about how mid others view them, ironically becoming part of the issue he spoke out against, but not in the way he intended, that issue being Toonheads having severe levels of toxic positivity. And I believe that ties into another mentality towards fan elitism. To them, not liking the current state of animation means you aren't a true fan. Mason himself practically said such in the video we started with, and unfortunately, a lot of this behavior is used to weaponize new animated projects, especially independent ones. And look, I also want indie animation to be more sustainable, but projects like Pastmates fail to match the realistic limitations they have to deal with. You don't need crazy budgets to make something great, as proven by how many well-done works manage this challenge past and present. You aren't going to compete with Lackadaisy or Hell of a Boss overnight. Paying your staff well shouldn't be used as a crutch either, even if that's an incentive many major studios fail to provide. Pastmates has so little going on for it right now that I can't even call it mid. It's sub-mid. Most media consider just regular mid only fails because it doesn't meet audience expectations or is mildly uninteresting, instead of being really that bad. That essentially sums up how I felt rewatching Doodle Tunes. This, however, shares the uninteresting quality, but appears to offer even less than your typical boring movie. It's weak, but in a very forgettable way. But that's besides the point. It being a lame pitch isn't the worst thing in the world, and it's not why I wanted to spotlight this. If it was just that, I wouldn't have even bothered. How he's handled the project, though, has got to be the most misguided I've seen in ages. Even more so than the previously discussed Growing Around or whatever Daft Penis cartoon idea was. So unless Mason is able to better elaborate on his concepts in the future and resolve the many issues with his Kickstarter, this will forever remain a worthless endeavor. And sadly, I think even Mason realizes that. Promotion's been dry ever since, signaling its abandonment. Not even a minor successful video or a promotion from Babyland could do much. There is one positive I can say though. I at least have better faith in him as a cartoonist than a political rapper.
Coming from the fantasy world, Christians say home was on underworld. Rumors swirling like a huge whirl. God, this makes me wanna hurl.
That song is on Spotify, by the way. Once again, I don't mean to sound so negative on Pastmates just for the sake of it. Pitching a show has its challenges, more so if you have minimal experience. I've had concepts for my own series over the years which have also yet to be figured out, and I recognize that a graphic novel or webcomic would be a better format to start with than an ambitious cartoon, even if that's what we really want. Mason simply looks to be rushing the process, and as a result gave us far lower expectations relative to his own. It's best that he goes back to the drawing board, spending months or years polishing up Pastmates to a presentable level. Either way though, this may end up being lost in the shuffle, with numerous indie cartoon projects capitalizing on the movement for independent animation lately. It'd be unfortunate if so, but becoming a success without a good background is a crapshoot with little chance of winning. This isn't to be the motivating, it's just the harsh reality of it. It's wild the bizarre things you may uncover from what's on the surface a topical rant. I can't blame Mason much for bringing awareness to his own poorly planned venture, however I can blame Maskless Dream over here for getting this cursed filth into my recommendations, so thanks for that. Anyways, I believe that's everything worth discussing towards this crappy campaign. Thank you all for watching. If you're new and interested in my style of critiquing, please check out the rest of my channel. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you'd like. Comments are also appreciated if you have any thoughts or criticisms towards the subject or the video itself. Now if you don't mind, I've got to watch more of that crazy animal cartoon from the land of croissants. Au revoir les amis.
Do you really want some chicken sandwich? Do you?
No, thank you.
No!